What if, years into the future, technology doesn't work with people, but for people? What if the next medical breakthrough doesn't come from a lab, but a conversation between a doctor and a machine? Most of the time, the first thing an infant sees when they open their eyes is a hospital. They see the blinding lights, white walls, and blue scrubs. They hear the constant beeping of machines and the chatter of medical professionals around them. Many times, the last thing a person sees before leaving this world is also a hospital, but not the same one they were born in. The machines have changed, the people are different, and so are the things they see or smell around them. But these aspects, they don't change overnight. Usually, it's a slow progression from A to Z. But what does this progression entail? But before that, here's a few differences between me and most babies. Most babies, they're born, they're cleaned, and they're taken straight out of the hospital the first chance they get. But not me. The hospital kept me as close as someone would keep their lucky sock. In fact, it's quite possible that in a few more years, my medical history will be as large as the average textbook. And here's another difference. Most of the time, you hear a birth story. It's grand, it's impressive, it's dramatic. A ray of light hit the hospital, and my ray of light was born. But again, not me. My birth story started quite differently. 2 days after I was born, I started having convulsions. Now, I don't remember this, which is great. Because if I did, I would have a very different relationship with hospitals today. After examinations, the doctors, ruling out any neurological disparities, diagnosed me with a calcium deficiency. Doing the standard next step, the doctors infused calcium into me over a period of time. After an infusion, I would be okay. But hours later, the shaking would start, and my calcium levels would drop again. But not knowing what else to do, they repeated the process. Once, twice, thrice. For over a period of a week, my calcium levels could not make up their mind. This was until they brought me to an endocrinologist who diagnosed me with a vitamin D deficiency. Since the vitamin is used for the absorption of calcium, this deficiency showed up as a different symptom. But between all of this, an infant was hospitalized for at least a month after birth. For a month, all the infant saw was the rise and fall of their heartbeat on a machine. But right before the discharge papers were put in front of us, it became known that I had contracted a hospital-acquired infection. It was at this time when everyone around me realized it. I had become the hospital's chosen one. And believe me, that is not a good thing. When I finally left the hospital, I had stayed there for over 40 days. And it seems to me that my life's purpose has become to break that record. At 2 years old, the children around me were speaking in 2-syllable words. But I was saying absolutely nothing. My parents, concerned, took me to a speech therapist who laid the facts out. The velum, a soft palate between your nasal passages and mouth, lowers to release nasal sounds like m, n, or g. But when it's raised, it releases oral sounds like p, t, or k. After testing my speaking, it was determined that I could mainly only say nasal sounds, and oral sounds were very hard to express. In Tamil, the word for father is appa. But due to it containing a strong oral sound, I couldn't call my father Appa for the first few years of my life. Instead, I referred to him as the easier alternative, Amma. So if you think about it, I had two mothers for a long period of my life. After years of speech therapy, countless exercises patiently administered by my parents, my condition improved. And I stand here today, not only being able to say words, but complete sentences. But the condition's effects still affect me today. Out of habit, I still call my father Amma. But some experiences do stick with you longer than others. At 8 years, the hospital started missing me again. And on a seemingly normal night, I started having sharp pains in my chest. I still remember my father carrying me to the car. I still remember my parents rushing me to the emergency room of the nearest hospital. I still remember the chaos around me as I was taken from one room to another to take scans to diagnose my condition. In the midst of all the pain, I was diagnosed with pneumonia. The doctors inserted an IV line into my left arm, and every day for a week, I was in the hospital for more than an hour as they injected medicines into me. It's still one of my clearest memories, sitting in that hospital bed with the family member that was chosen to accompany me that day. It's no secret that medicine today is vastly different from medicine a decade ago. Technology is progressing at an exponential pace, and all industries, not only medicine, have to fight to keep up. But how are they? So let's come back to the present. If those same instances were to be repeated today, what would be different? To test a calcium deficiency a decade ago, only the test for calcium would be prescribed. But today, testing a calcium deficiency comes with prescribing tests for vitamin D and multiple other hormones as well. So if a baby comes into the hospital with convulsions, they are not only tested to find the deficiency, but the root cause of the deficiency. This is not just a change in equipment, it's a change in mindset. Instead of asking, how do we fix the calcium? We ask, why was it so low in the first place? In an era of digital innovation, speech therapy has evolved with it. Sessions that were conducted only on a face-to-face basis can now be conducted online. And the only traffic patients have to worry about is their Wi-Fi. Worksheets and activities that were earlier only given physically are now available digitally, giving a wider range of interactivity for both younger and older audiences. Because if you tell a child to do the same thing 10 times, they would rather give up speaking altogether. But if you include it in a game, the child suddenly wants to become the best speaker in the world. Earlier, basic chest x-rays were used for the diagnosis of pneumonia, with the pathogen taking 48 to 72 hours to identify. That is 48 to 72 hours that the patient has to panic and then search up their symptoms on the internet when they don't know what to do. And then they panic even more because the internet tells them that they might have cancer. But today, PCR panels analyze pathogens at a molecular level, giving the answer just in a matter of hours. Treatments also focus on care after the infections, breaking the patient's fears and increasing their confidence, allowing them to adapt back into their usual routine. But technology in medicine is not limited to these specific cases. Today, there are a wide range of technology used in all parts of medicine. The awareness of public health is increasing as mobile fitness trackers, watches, and so many other devices log calories, blood pressure, and other vitals at increasing precision. Complex yet minimally invasive procedures are done through robotic surgery, where the surgeon controls the robot from a remote location, using cameras and x rays to receive live footage of the patient on the operating table. Now, the most experienced surgeons from all around the world can do your procedure, whether you're 50 or 50,000 miles away. The treatment also reduces the risk of infection and the duration of your hospital stay. The patient doesn't have to think twice before jumping back into their usual routine. I still remember my visits to the doctor's clinic. The constant reminders to bring the huge pile of files with scans, x-rays, and the contents of every time I visited a doctor since before I was born. But today, I also remember how annoyed my parents were when we reached the clinic, and then I had realized I had forgotten the files. But today, all those information fit into incredibly small USB drives, ones that fit right into your pocket and ensure you never have to worry about forgetting your medical history again. Even the process of learning medicine has changed, as technologies like virtual reality allow students to see parts inside the human body before they even hold their first surgical tool. As a medical aspirant, it is important for me to look at medicine in the future, not only in the perspective of a patient, but in the perspective of a healthcare professional. If technology has already grown in leaps and bounds, how far can it go, given a few more decades? Skipping to the future, I can see two pathways that the medical industry might take. Pathway 1 is a technology takeover. Technology is not just used as a tool anymore. It governs the entire system. The minute the patient walks into the hospital, they are not greeted by a human receptionist, but a machine, greeting everyone in the same mechanical manner. Then, they make their way into AI prompt stations, where questions are asked to inquire into the patient's condition. This information is stored in large databases, where the patient isn't a name, they aren't a personality, they are an ID number. After evaluation, AI systems use the information and encoded algorithms to diagnose and prescribe the patient. Operating rooms that are now filled with staff will be virtually empty, silent, except for the buzzing of machines as they conduct precise procedures, and human lives are entrusted into the hands of programmed devices. Is it efficient? Definitely. But is it terrifying? Absolutely. Because how do you look at a robot straight into its eyes and say, "Oh, I've been feeling really tired lately," and try not to laugh out loud when it says, "Oh, maybe you should install a software update sometime soon"? Ethical concerns are still prevalent, and many ask the questions: is this really secure? Who or what actually has access to our most personal data? To what extent can humans trust automated devices with their lives? But with lower employee costs and limited working hours, healthcare costs have drastically reduced. But does healthcare now cost us in other ways? Now let's look at another pathway: technology integration. In this world, technology doesn't run the healthcare system, but it's an integral part of it. When the patient walks into the hospital's sterile surroundings, ones that were cleaned automatically, they have nothing in their hands. No bulky files, newspapers, or prescriptions. All they need to do is identify themselves through biometrics, a simple fingerprint, or retina scan, and all that confidential information is pulled up. But alongside lists of allergies, previous ailments, and other medical information lies another column, one that holds the patient's fears, their thoughts, and their preferences. Now, the doctors know that the 5-year-old girl with diabetes only bears needles when she's given her favorite stuffed toy. Now, the doctors know that the staunch smell of hospital sanitizer triggers a traumatic response for the 15-year-old with a surgery. Patients are not just numbers or records on a database. They are living, breathing humans with their own fears and hopes that the medical system doesn't work around. It caters to. Doctors are not just taught about the human body. They are taught about the human mind. How do you respond when a child as young as 5 asks you how long she has to live? What do you do when patients come back telling you that their memories from their surgeries stop them from falling asleep? Patients walk into the hospital knowing that they're not only trained but in safe hands. Medical professionals have expanded their teams to include robots and AI because now they're equal with only one goal in mind: to care for the patient. Medicine now takes so much more than the form of treating. It takes the form of healing. But regardless of how the world is going to change, how will I change? With technology growing and growing, what do we have to do and save the day? Hence comes the long talk about balance. When do we start? Where do we start? How do we know to take the plunge, but not to go in too deep? When talks take place of the possibility of technology taking over our world, they focus on a scenario where something we made has gone beyond our control. In our future, we don't have to choose between the absence and the complete takeover of technology. Let's make the future a place where medicine doesn't see humans as data, but as people with thoughts, emotions, and feelings. Let's make the future a place where life does not just live, it thrives. I don't think in the future medicines and technology will collaborate. They will co-create. Machines with machines. There might be a lesser chance of error, a higher accuracy rate, and lines at a pharmacy will definitely be shorter. But in places where a machine checks a huge database to find out who to diagnose first, a doctor looks at worrying relatives, crying infants, and prioritizes compassion. I was once a 2-day-old with a calcium deficiency. I was once a toddler who couldn't speak. I was once an 8-year-old with an IV in her arm. I am now a 15-year-old who knows that the hospital is never going to leave her alone. But who do I want to be? I want to be the doctor who balances the empathy and the experience of humans with the precision and efficiency of machines. I want to be the doctor who works with technology, not only diagnosing the patient with a touch of a stethoscope, but double checking it with the paragraphs of data developed by an AI agent. I want to be the doctor who doesn't see patients as data or numbers or IDs, but as people who can think, speak, and voice their emotions. Because machines and technology do not pave the path for our future. We do.